It was night, and Emily, as usual, headed towards her father's room to meet him. Even though he was out of town, Emily had a habit of visiting his room before going to bed. As soon as she opened the door, she saw that her brother, Jake, and their new mother, Sarah, were there, and something was happening that Emily couldn't understand. Friends, be sure to listen to the entire story till the end. It's very interesting. If you're new to our channel, please subscribe and like the video. This story is about a family from Putna, which includes Emily, her brother Jake, their father, and their grandfather. A year ago, Emily's mother and grandmother had passed away in a car accident, which changed the entire family's life. Now only 4 members remained in the family. People began pressuring Emily's father to remarry. The grandfather and neighbors said he should get married again, but father always said that he had started his life with his first wife and a second marriage was not possible. For him, even a year after the mother's passing, father was not ready for a second marriage. Time passed, and the decision was made to hire a maid to help with the household chores. However, the maid also took a 15-day leave every month, causing the household chores to fall apart. Emily also tried cooking, but she was only 12 years old, and cooking properly was difficult for her. Father had to eat out at restaurants instead of having home-cooked meals. Father often went to a restaurant where a 28-year-old girl, Sarah, also visited. Gradually, Sarah started talking to father and became attracted to him. Sarah liked father, even though he was 10 years older than her. One day, some boys began bothering Sarah at the restaurant. Father noticed and immediately went to sit with Sarah, causing the boys to leave. After this incident, father and Sarah grew closer. Whenever father went to the restaurant, Sarah would sit with him and eat. Then one day, Sarah told father she needed a rented house and wanted him to go with her to see the place. At first, father refused, but the next time Sarah asked, he couldn't refuse and went to see the place with her. When father arrived, some people were misbehaving with Sarah. Father tried to stop them, but they pushed him aside. In the meantime, Sarah told those people that she loved someone else and offered them money. They asked who she loved, and Sarah pointed to father. Seeing this, the people started laughing. Father took a bold step to handle the situation. He said, "If she were my wife, would you leave her alone?" The people said, "Absolutely, but we need all the money." Father immediately took another bold step and said that Sarah was his wife. After that, the people left. After this incident, father brought Sarah home and married her. Sarah was very beautiful and young, and after the marriage, the atmosphere at home changed significantly. With the arrival of the new mother, happiness returned to the house. Emily's brother, Jake, began liking Sarah's cooking so much that sometimes he wouldn't even go to the university and would stay home. One day, father had gone to the office and Jake had taken a leave from the university. Grandfather was watching TV in his room, and Emily was sitting in the hall painting as she was very fond of drawing. Suddenly, strange noises started coming from Sarah's room. Emily became anxious and rushed there. When she reached the door, she saw that her brother Jake was already standing there. Jake told Emily, "Do your own thing, there's no need to be here." He stopped Emily from entering and she stood by the door, her eyes filled with uncertainty and waves of questions. Emily felt uneasy as she sensed something odd between her brother, Jake, and the new mother, Sarah. One day, while she was busy with her painting, she heard noises coming from her mother's room. She quickly reached the door, but Jake was standing there. He stopped Emily from going inside and said, "The light in Mom's bathroom was broken, I came to fix it." Saying this, Jake went back to his room. Emily thought for a while but then got back to focusing on her painting. A few days passed, and Emily slowly began to feel uncomfortable with the growing closeness between Jake and Sarah. Then one day Jake's birthday came. Jake had gone out with Sarah to prepare for the birthday. The next 7 days passed, and Jake's birthday was celebrated with great fanfare. After cutting the cake, father received a phone call informing him that he had to go out for some urgent work. At the party, friends and family had a lot of fun, and Jake received many gifts. Emily was very eager to see the gifts, but she knew it wasn't right to open any gift without Jake's permission, otherwise, he would get angry. She searched for Jake in his room, but he wasn't there. She started looking throughout the house. Then she heard some noises coming from the mother's room. The door was slightly ajar. Emily peered inside and saw Jake standing behind Sarah. He was hugging Sarah, but Sarah appeared to be sad. Both were startled to see Emily. She immediately asked Jake, "What are you doing here?" Sarah replied, "I wanted to give Jake a gift, so I called him." Sarah took a gift out of the cupboard and gave it to Jake. Upon this, Emily thought that maybe what she had seen wasn't as important as she initially thought. The next day, Sarah's relatives came with a marriage proposal for Emily's brother. They said, "Jake has reached marriageable age, he should be settled down now." Sarah immediately rejected the proposal and said, It's not right to bind Jake in marriage so soon. After that, Sarah said a lot of things and then she fell silent. The next few days went by like this. Sometimes Sarah would go to Jake's room. Sometimes Jake would visit her room. Emily was watching all this but couldn't understand what was going on. One day when Jake was away at the university, Sarah called Emily and discussed a few things. She said, "I've noticed Jake's behavior has become a bit strange for the past few days. He has been getting up in the middle of the night and going somewhere, and I feel that the atmosphere in this house isn't right." Emily was surprised to hear this. She didn't know how to respond. She thought she should probably talk to Jake about it. A little later, when Jake came home, Emily saw that Sarah was feeding him. Emily quietly went to her room. But just as she did every night when she went to meet her father in his room, she went this time as well. Although father was out of town for work and wasn't coming home at night, Emily opened the door to Sarah's room and saw Jake sitting next to Sarah. Seeing this, Emily became suspicious that something odd was going on between Sarah and Jake. Emily immediately asked Jake, "What are you doing in Mom's room?" Emily's suspicion deepened that day when she sensed an unusual relationship between her mother, Sarah, and brother, Jake. One day, when she went into Sarah's room to ask her to rest so she could paint a new picture of her, she noticed some deep scratch marks on Sarah's back. She immediately asked Sarah, "How did you get these marks on your back?" Sarah laughed and said, "These are marks of your father's love." But Emily knew that father hadn't been home for the past 5 days, and seeing these marks made her feel that Sarah was lying to her. As soon as she heard Jake's voice, Sarah suddenly got up and left the room. Emily noticed that her mother's concern for Jake was much greater than for her. Over the next few days, Emily saw several situations between her mother and brother that seemed unusual to her. One night, when her father was not at home, Emily thought she would show her mother the picture she had taken in the afternoon. She went to her mother's room, and as she approached, she heard strange noises from inside. She was alarmed, thinking her mother might be ill. She immediately went to Jake's room to call him, but he was not there. Emily thought Jake must have gone out with his friends, but when she returned to her mother's room, she heard Jake's voice coming from inside. It was 11 p.m., and Emily couldn't understand what Jake and her mother could be doing in the same room so late at night. The noises were unsettling, and she couldn't sleep the whole night. The next day, while Emily was having breakfast, she noticed that Sarah and Dinesh had a strange happiness on their faces. During breakfast, Emily suddenly felt someone's touch on her foot. She looked down and saw it was Dinesh's foot. Emily was startled but said nothing. After a while, she looked down again and saw that Dinesh and Sarah's feet were on each other. This time Emily noticed that her mother was not trying to stop it. Instead, she seemed to find it normal. That night, when her father came home, everyone went to their rooms after dinner. Before going to sleep, Emily took a glass of milk to her mother and asked, "Mom, why do you give Dad this milk every day?" Sarah replied with a smile, "Your father needs this milk because his strength has decreased with age, and his wife is still young. This milk gives him strength." Emily didn't understand this, and when she asked her mother further, her mother placed her hand on her head and said, "You are still too young to understand all this." That night, Emily saw Dinesh preparing by taking a shower and spraying perfume on himself. She thought Dinesh must be going out for a special occasion, so she said nothing. Sometime later, Emily started hearing her mother's screams. She was frightened and went to her brother's room. The door was slightly ajar, and when she peeked inside, the scene she saw made her feel like the ground had slipped from under her feet. Emily remembered that her mother often used to call Dinesh into her room for small tasks. The events of that day and recent occurrences had created many negative thoughts in Emily's mind about her mother and brother's relationship. She saw something unusual going on between her brother Dinesh and her mother Sarah. Her mother often said, "You are still young, you won't understand." But Emily knew she wasn't too young to understand everything. When she saw the pictures of her mother and Dinesh, many questions arose in her mind. The next day, while her father was preparing to go to the office, her mother's health suddenly deteriorated. Dinesh immediately called the doctor. The news the doctor brought changed the atmosphere in the house completely. Sarah was pregnant. Her father was extremely happy with the news, and Emily tried to look happy too, but the lines of fear and worry were clearly visible on her mother and Dinesh's faces. They were looking at each other strangely. Her father took a leave to share the joy with his friends, but all day long, the dejection on her mother's face was evident. Her mother did not say a word to Dinesh all day, but at night she went back to Dinesh's room. Emily began to have more doubts about the relationship. She came out of her room and slowly walked towards Jake's room. The door was slightly ajar, and when Emily saw the scene inside, her heart nearly stopped. Her mother was hugging Jake and saying, "Jake, I'm pregnant. What should we name this baby?" From their conversation, it seemed as though the baby wasn't her father's but Jake's. Just as Emily was witnessing this, her father arrived there too. He fully opened the door, and upon seeing her mother and Jake in each other's arms, he was stunned. The look on her father's face was one of deep hurt and shock. Taking a deep breath, her father said, "Jake, you are now grown up, you can take care of your sister and yourself. I am going to Saudi Arabia with my wife tomorrow morning." As her father started to leave the room, her mother stopped him. The panic on her mother's and Jake's faces was evident. Her mother slowly began to speak. "I am sorry, but the truth is that I like Jake, and the baby growing in my womb is also Jake's." Hearing this, her father's face grew even sterner. He showed Jake a picture that Emily had taken in the afternoon, where her mother and Jake were standing together. Her father said, "Jake, you have deceived your father. You knew that Sarah is my wife. Yet you did this. I had already figured it out, but I wanted to hear the truth from you," her father continued. "Now get out of my sight." Hearing this, Jake's eyes filled with tears, and her mother started crying loudly. Her mother, in a trembling voice, said, "We are sorry, but all this happened due to circumstances. We have been involved for the past 3 years, and we love each other. Our marriage had happened long ago, but we never had the courage to tell the truth." Her father looked at them with a deep gaze and then left. After that, her mother revealed another truth to her father, that they had been mixing medicine into his milk every night so that he would never touch them. Even after hearing this, her father forgave them both because they were his children. The next day, her father took Jake and Sarah to the temple and got them married. In this way, Sarah, who was almost going to be Jake's mother, became his wife, and their child got the name of his real father. The essence of the story is that taking some decisions at the right time is extremely important because after time has passed, nothing remains except regret. If you like this story, please like it and share it with your friends. For more interesting stories like this, subscribe to our channel and don't forget to press the bell icon to get updates on new stories.